Howdy chaps, and welcome back to part 1, 2, 3. I don't know how many parts this particular series is going to involve in doing this parcel shelf, but we'll try and make it work. I don't know, sort of trying to get it all done and trying to film it at the same time, but I'm more focused in this particular job of actually doing the work rather than actually filming tons of it. I know I'm trying to do a walkthrough, but I still need to get it done as well, if that makes any sense. So today we are going to catch up where we left off. Part 2 ended with us slipping in the new lower section, which absolutely just glided in there like you wouldn't believe, which is not at all surprising. So we're now pulled it back out. I'm going to drill my plug weld holes, clean up all the surface rust that built up on it since it sat around here for about a week. Worst thing we did is hose the floor out and accidentally got a little bit wet, so it got a little bit rusty. But we can fix that. I know a guy. So yeah, we're going to drill out the plug weld holes, and then I will prep it with some copper spray, spray the rest of it with, once I get all the surface rust off it, spray the rest of it with etch primer and a bit of black, I reckon, and stick it in. What I'm thinking is potentially removing, once I've got this sitting in and welded in a couple of places, and I'm going to chuck a couple of key welds in the back there. What I'm thinking about doing is actually removing the front half of the parcel shelf, you know, where the speakers sit, because it's fairly easy. Removing that so I can clean under the lip where they join 100%, so I know that it's all perfect, rather than being under there and having to lay in the boot floor and clean it that way and not be dead certain. If I take it out, which isn't that difficult, I can flip it up the right way, sandblast all the surfaces, make sure it's perfect, clean that side really easy, and then slip it back in, and it'll be a much nicer job, which is what I think I'm doing. So I feel like I'm making this parcel shelf repair series quite long, but you know, I'll try and keep it entertaining. So I will show you what's next. I just picked up this off the floor and I was like, wow, that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. This side was far worse. The passenger side of this car, I don't know what it is. Sometimes I do honestly believe it's got to do with how they were sitting, because cars will rust out areas a bit differently depending on whether or not they've been driving their whole life or sitting a good chunk of time. So straight off the bat, we're going to drill, considering an average spot weld is about an inch apart, so you're going to need 1, 2, 3 and 4 through there. You're also going to need a pair of them, so 2, 4, 6, 8, so it joins on the top of the hinge right there. This area here is going to slip underneath the upper tray, and this is what I was talking about just before. I'm thinking about taking this out once I've got the tray in, and I'll just tack it in a couple of key areas under here just so it's holding it, and that way the car's braced a bit more, so that when I take out this panel, the car doesn't go ooh and go a bit loosey-goosey. So, but I really want to clean the underside of this where they join together. I want it, I really want that super clean, and it's not, you just got like a couple more spot welds here and then just a couple on the front, and this piece just falls off basically. Well, it won't fall off, but I'll take it off carefully, but I just want to clean it properly before I put it back in. I don't like doing things shonkily, although, you know, that's life. Sometimes you have to do a couple of cut corners, but when it's major rust repairs, I don't like cutting corners at all. Also, I thought I'd sneak in, the EJ donor section has been progressing in the background. The old boy has gotten very good at drilling out spot welds, because there's been a lot of them. So you might notice that the EH cut is looking a bit different. Got the, some of it was rusty, I'll admit. I don't know what that's doing there. So this is the cowl section. So a bit of this is going to be almost an EJ update at the same time. But here's the big difference between EJ and EHs in the plenum chamber area. Now that you got them side by side, EJ to holes, one big one, but the sides are all the same. So this had about 1 million plug welds, and that's how that came off. It came off, you drilled all them out. You actually had to drill some of them out going this way as well, so that was less than fun. And believe it or not, the plenum chamber just sort of sits in the hole and sits on the top of the firewall, and so not only do you have to drill this out to get the top panel off, but there's actually yet another set of spot welds once you got that one off that join the plenum chamber to the dashboard top, which is just mind-blowing. I'm like, they didn't want these cars to come apart, did they? Oh, and in the corners they had just a little blob of welds, just, you know, obviously rounded out. So this side was rusted off, but this side was still there, so that's not a big issue for me. And it's going to suck getting this one out because there isn't many of the welds left. I'll show you the plenum chamber. It's actually pretty good. I know this is a bit of a detour, but you guys like seeing what the latest of everything is. Over, under, in and out. That's what shoe tying's all about. So unfortunately the EJ donor plenum chamber did have a little bit of rust in it. So right there, unfortunately. And after a light sandblast, it picked up a couple extra holes. So unfortunately not 100% great, but certainly miles better than what I was dealing with. Also, I noticed that this side had what looks to be like it had a pool of water sitting in it for a long time, whereas the rest of it, all the way the other side, is perfectly dry. There isn't a drop of rust anywhere but this side. So I'm thinking, and there's no way for that to have happened here when it was upside down, so that's happened while it was the right way up, if that makes any sense. So I was speaking with DJ, and he reckons that in the entire time he's been in the bush, which is 7 or 8 years, that EH has always been upside down. And I said to him, well, it's been the right way up for a long time prior to that as well, for that to happen. That's just from sitting. You wouldn't get that if you were driving the car. That's from it being parked. So I think that EH, being one of the most rust-free cars I've ever encountered, I reckon it died fairly young in its life and got parked in the bush and left for dead. So yeah, anyway, it is a very good donor section, and even all of these areas are fantastic. So the firewall, the plenum chamber sort of goes zip and sort of slips in and sits on the actual firewall lip. So interesting when you can deconstruct them down to their key components. So, and I've managed to retrieve the new dash surround too and got this one out. So it's going to suck a bit getting this plenum out, but we'll just have to deal with it. And then of course thinking about how the hell I'm going to oh, what a noise. How I'm going to join this to this or this to that, because you might notice that they're significantly different. The other option is to just snip the sides and just put these sides on here, and I believe that this height is still the same, but obviously on the EH that they move this rubber seal to the actual vent that sits in there, which makes me believe that maybe this is slightly taller on the EJ than the EH, because then you have to make up that height gap with another panel that sits on it with a seal in it. So it might not be exactly the same, but I'd like to think I'm capable of figuring something out as we go along. I still haven't heard any updates from the XB transmission yet, which kind of sucks, but I assume that's in the works and progressing along nicely. So that XB, the C4 that I got with that motor there, which I got off old Phil Edmondson, who has his channel called Filthy Builds, so that motor came off that, the trans came off that motor, and that motor I got off him. So I sent the trans off to be looked at. It turned out the trans was dead, just like the one in the car. Well, it wasn't dead, but there was no point putting it in its current condition because it just wouldn't shift properly or do anything like it should. So that's off. That I decided to bite the bullet with that one and spend the money and have that rebuilt. I'm also going to pay Southern Automatics to fit the transmission too, because I don't know about you, but putting one of these big honking transmissions in a car without a hoist is less than enjoyable. I think pulling teeth might be more fun because at least you don't feel the pain. But that's pretty much a wrap on everything that's going on. The other option is, the other thing I've got floating in the background is I'm keeping my eyes on Pickles online for a write-off to play with. I've got the itch. I need to buy myself another smashed car to play with. Sometimes I love old cars, but I really want a modern car to play with again because they're so much easier. But yes, enough chit chat. Paddywhack, give the dog a bone. I'm going to drill out these holes and get that prepped so you can enjoy me putting it in. Right chaps, you might have seen those two little time lapses. I was prepping the panel. I have since drilled all my holes for where my plug weld's going to be. I sanded it a little bit, and then I've gotten some, it's pretty much deoxidine, it's just a spray on rust converter, and I just wanted to get all the, stay there, all the bits of surface rust off. I'm going to flip it over and do the underside for it in a minute. You'll notice it's got a bit of a film on it. That, I believe, according to the instructions, I did read the data sheet, that's sort of how it's supposed to be when you're finished. I'm no expert on rust converter, weirdly enough. I don't tend to use it because part of me doesn't really trust it that much. But there are a lot of people who swear by it, and I just read the instructions, spray on, leave for a couple of minutes. I rubbed it in a little bit to help loosen the rust, and then you wipe it over it with a, well, he says a rinse, which I always thought was the weirdest thing, is rinsing it with water, but that's apparently what you're supposed to do. Rinse it and dry it really quick so that it doesn't flash rust, which, you know, I had a couple of test goes prior to actually filming that, so that's sort of, it's got like a bluish tinge to it. There isn't any rust on it, it's all gone. And what I'm going to do just prior to painting it is I'm going to just scotch it a little bit and I'll etch it, and it should be a-okay according to the instructions. So it's pretty good at getting rid of light rust. I don't know how fantastic it is on getting rid of heavy rust. I much prefer sandblasting, that's just me and my preferred techniques. So I'm going to get all this just surface rust off. I sprayed it on the EJ for a smidge there, and it kind of worked. I had a few test goes before filming. Yeah, I don't know, it's hit and miss. I know that I've done it before, and when it works it's supposed to look like this, and this is how they teach it at trade school, to use deoxidine and all that stuff. But considering I'm not an expert in it, I'm not going to speak like it's gospel. So it's how you get it, you give it a whirl and tell me how you go with it, and I'll happily listen to any tips that you've got. But it seems to have worked fairly well. I know that I did this to an EH guard. Actually, it's that one up there that ended up with paint all over it. I did it to it and it stayed like this and didn't pick up any rust for a very, very long time. So I think that's actually how it's sort of keeps rust at bay. I know that that won't rust for a while, just from personal experience. But that's what I used, that's how I did it. Spray on, rub it in a little bit, damp rag, wipe it off, and dry it very quickly. I think sometimes you can use methylated spirits and water, I think, but it just comes down to trial and error. Also on this thing, I used the original rusty piece, which still isn't anywhere near me, and I templated it out and put in the hole for the boot light one day, because this car is actually a Fairmont. Actually no, it's not, it's just a Falcon, but it's a GS Falcon, so they had things like boot lights and things. But I know that that's where that goes because there it is up there actually. Yeah, I just put it over the top of this and it fit perfectly, and just drilled my hole. So I thought it was going to be in the middle, I thought it was on that side, but no, it's actually on this side of that. But anyway, I'm going to prep it up in a second, do the other side, copper spray along here, and I'm going to tape it up and then paint, obviously copper spray there, and I'm going to paint that area black, just that midsection, so that if that's got some pretty heavy duty paint on it, that probably will take a long time to rust out again. So I'll catch you up in a second. Alright, it's time to review, see how well I did. I taped up where I'm going to weld because I don't really want paint over them. But obviously I copper sprayed first. Just peel that off. Now I've sprayed that with some anti-rust enamel paint because enamel paint seems to last a hell of a lot longer than most other paints. But yes, obviously where everything's going to be. Ooh, look, custom garage. Is it going to focus? Focus? Possibly not. Everywhere that it's obviously going to be welded, it is obviously coated with copper spray. La copper, la spray. And obviously I'm going to have to do the other side in a second. And somehow peel this up. Yeah, just like that. Oh, and when I finish welding and grounding, I'll just throw in a little bit of the same paint again, just so you know it's all sealed up and lovely. Oop. Get off my finger. Do 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 do. Obviously I'm going to smudge it a little bit, but hey, there we go. Right, so the top side is ready to rock and roll. I'm going to obviously do the same equivalent on the underside, although realistically it doesn't need anything under there because the welds actually go through from the top. I just need to prep the underside panel, and that just needs to be painted black on the other side. Obviously if I prep it black now, when you weld it'll burn the paint off, but you can just come along with a brush and just wire wheel it slightly, just scotch it, and then throw your black back over the top of it again, just to make it a bit prettier. But I wanted to make sure that this area, because these always rust out from the inside out, to make sure that this area was perfect. And of course putting that hole in, it has paint all around its edges and everything, so it's all perfect. So that is looking lovely. I'm going to turn it over, like I just said 35 times. Spray some copper spray on the ends, spray the rest of it black, and hopefully that doesn't smudge it. But you can see where I was talking about before, I've obviously wiped it with that dioxazine. Everywhere there was a rust stain, it just wiped straight off, so we're giggling like a schoolgirl. Right, we have the bit painted, prepped, ready to go, clamped back in. Don't worry about this gutter, I have a distinct feeling I will potentially be replacing it once I have that piece in. It would probably be done at the end of the finalising, you know, when things just end up being a little bit worse than they are. So that's ready to rock and roll in my opinion. That's all lovely and painted. We'll get a hole for the thing. That's now pretty much ready to be in there forever. I did notice one thing, and it will be a bit of a hint for anybody, any new players. These cars are not built well. They are not assembled in any good fashion. See how it's hanging off here? It's not hard up against it. It's sort of like close enough that'll do. So that's not lined up here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's not even. But on the other side, it is. Gotta go the long way around this stuff. See? Absolutely perfectly lined up. So they got one side good, and the other side crooked. So when you go to put this in, and you go, oh, just line it up so this gap is the same on both sides. Well, you can't, because this panel's been installed slightly crooked. And I've encountered that absolutely tons on these cars. These cars are just, because they're built by people, people make mistakes, don't they? So, crooked. So you pretty much have to take a calculated guess and just put that in even, or as close you can, because you won't be able to get it 100% because if you're going off stuff around it, well, that stuff isn't perfect either, so you just have to go for a happy medium, and that's all I can tell you. So I've gone for in the middle and sort of, you know, the right amount either side, and clamped it in, and I will weld this in a jiffy. So you might have seen from that time lapse that I got the parcel shelf welded in and ground down, so that section's in, looking lovely. I have since removed the speaker section, which I think was a wise idea, because you can never see the really good people who do restos. Yeah, I still don't think I'm that good, but the people who do them for big boy clients where they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars will de-skin everything to get every last drop of rust, such as this, because you do get rust underneath surfaces between skins. So they're the kind of guys who will charge customers hundreds of dollars an hour, and they'll de-skin a car and do all of it properly and blast a bare shell with no skins on or anything. That realistically is probably the best way to do it to guarantee you'll never get rust again. But even like for my shop, I don't say that I won't quote rust repairs. It's just it's just impossible, because I was working on it and I discovered hidden in there is another conveniently placed rust hole. I was like, does this thing ever have not stopped getting rust in it? As soon as you start making progress, you find another hole of rust. I mean, when I took this parcel shelf out, those spot welds there were super reluctant to come out, so me and the chisel got a bit chisel happy, but I will fix that up prior to it going back in. But yeah, see if I can zoom in on this rust. Please ignore that. Please ignore that. Yeah, look at the rust. Nice little convenient little rust hole. But yeah, and crazy. But this is in, looking lovely, nice and coated. So over here is what I really wanted to do. I wanted to get, it's really difficult to clean that while that was in the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blast around these edges so that the seam is beautiful and clean. See that? See, I had the chisel, I was chiseling, I drilled out these spot welds, but then of course somebody was obviously on training day when they welded this on, because it was about 1,000 spot welds just in that one section, and I was like, oh, this is just getting ridiculous. So I started chiseling at it, and obviously that never helps, so it looks a bit manky, but I will, when that's finished, you won't even know. And on this side I was like, well, I'm not going through that twice, so I got out the belt sander and just belt sanded out all the spot welds, and then it just sort of popped off, which is what I really wanted to have happen on the other side. So yeah, so I'm going to take this outside, set up my big sandblaster. I'm going to sandblast this edge here. I'm going to recoat all of this in black loveliness. You can see this one was stamped really well, because that's the factory Ford stamping. That was pressed nice and hard. I'll hammer out some of these. Like, you can see where the factory sort of went, I don't care, stamp, 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 and it's permanently had a fold in it. So I'll hammer that stuff out and make it a bit better, and then we'll go sticking that back in with this coated, that coated with primer, all that around there, and it'll be beautiful. Now, I'm not going to film every last drop of rust repair on this video, otherwise I'll have a 600 part series for just doing the parcel shelf. So I think I'm going to wrap up the video series on the parcel shelf, because it actually funnily enough, hasn't been my most popular video. I'm going to wrap it up once I have that back in, the upright and the front lip of this put back on, and then I'll stop and I'll go, that's your parcel shelf repair, because that's the majority of it anyway. Everybody knows how to fix gutters and everything, so that's about where I'll stop the series, otherwise it'll be never ending. So the next step is quite literally to sandblast this. And there, we go. Look at that, all the pitting gone, lovely. All I have to do now is copper spray it along there, around the sides, all that goodness, tape it off, and then repaint all of that with some of the anti-rust black that I painted on the top side of there. So same sort of stuff, we'll coat it inside and out. The sucky thing is, I think after discovering that hole over there, I reckon I'm going to have to get the speaker area prepped, and then I reckon I will probably move on to this upright panel and then the top section, because at least I want to wrap out some of this. I think I'm going to actually have to fix that hole in there prior to putting the grill section back in, because it will actually be a lot easier with that out. I mean, that's not an overly difficult repair in there, it's just a bit of a crappy location really. So I'll get this prepped anyway, and then I will get this one prepped, and in theory that could actually go straight in. It doesn't, because it sits straight on here and lines up with both ends, it really only goes in one spot, and then I can trim up this top panel to go in as well. And then once this is in, then I'll tackle this corner on its own as its own little repair. So that's where we're at, that's where I'm progressing to. We just encountered a bit of a hurdle with that rust hole that's over there, that's all. So that changes plans a little, but we're moving along quite nicely. So this is prepped and ready to go back in, although it's not going to go in just yet. That's going to sit and linger until I get the next couple of pieces in and that rust fixed up there. So my next thing is going to be prepping up this upright panel, because it sits just in here and it sits just in there and pretty much just sits straight on this panel, which is good because it'll give that panel a ton of strength. And then we'll weld that in, and then we'll prep up this top section, and then that'll be done. And I reckon whether we end the video at having this in, or the top on, or at least tacked in or something, will just depend on how well we go. So the very next thing we're going to do is I'm going to hole punch holes into this panel and then step drill them out so that I've got places to plug weld all the way along. I'm now going to scratch a line all the way along the edge there, so I can bare metal a small section of this and then copper spray that, so that when that goes on, it obviously goes to prepped steel. So that's what I'm going to do now. Catch up in a minute. Alrighty kids, it is ready to weld time. There's nothing else to do to this one except weld it in. I went and bought some big honking vice grips because, well, I mean, these are fantastic, but just don't have the reach at times, whereas these do. Got them sitting over there, the Milwaukee ones. So they're gonna be awesome. I wish I had them a lot earlier. So all we got left is to plug weld all the way along there to the ends, and then prep up the new piece to sit in here, and then we shall be giggling like schoolgirls, theoretically. It all lines up right, it's in the middle. You always get a bit nervous. You keep thinking, also one thing that keeps throwing me is I keep thinking that it's crooked, but it's because I didn't cut that line crooked as well. It looks like it's a bit wonky, but it's not. I swear it's fine. Right, I'm going to do a time lapse welding that in, and then I'm going to do a wrap up at the end of that, and then I reckon we'll end that for part 3, I think. Alrighty chaps, and we have the upright in, the main bottom in. I haven't obviously welded along here yet because I haven't quite decided what, as you can see there, you can see through the gutter, so I'm not going to finish that off until I have decided what I'm going to do there, but I'll sort that out later. I'm definitely not removing the beautiful original boot lid lip, there's no need to, plus I don't really like the look of this one. So at worst, all I can do is just trim out little bits of this and just piece it into there. So I think that'll be a better option for this. So this is all welded in, it's all prepped. Takes a bit of doing. I do recommend, if you're going to do this, you buy yourself some monstrously large vice grips. Especially if your parcel shelf section is still in too. You can go through the speaker holes and clamp that way. But you really do need to. By the way, that fold there, that lump, on the camera, was there in the panel when I got it. So I could potentially panel beat that out. I don't think that's supposed to be there, but that's not a big issue. I'm going to wrap up the video here, otherwise it's going to be horrendously long, I think. And then I'm going to just keep tickling away with this. I'm going to cut this in half, throw that section away for now, and just focus on putting in this front half here. And I reckon that will a nice job will be. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm hoping it's better than my last one, which didn't do as fantastic as I was hoping for part 2, but part 3 should be good. And all going well, later in the week I'll probably be stupid enough to spend money buying a car at Pickles, so you might get a new build of some kind of a modern car, which I'd like to do, build and sell. So that's some stuff I've got planned. So stay tuned, hopefully I'll get a few more videos out this week. Sorry for the delay between them, but you know, sometimes you've got to take a break from YouTube. So stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.